Kia ora and welcome to Cultured Conversations. My name is Kirsten Lacy and I am the director of the Auckland Art Gallery Toi, Tāmaki. We've created this podcast series so as to bring to you a range of ideas and issues that are shaping the cultural well-being of our communities here in Aotearoa New Zealand and the broader region. Speaking to a whole range of different leaders in a range of sectors as well, at the nexus of where arts and culture intersect with governance, government, policy, local politics, and health and well-being. I'm particularly excited today to be joined by tribal historian Joe Pihema, who is also a te reo expert, a senior advisor on tikanga to Ngāti Whātua Ōrākei, and also now the inaugural tikanga at the Auckland Art Gallery. Joe has 25 years experience in Māori education, Māori Broadcasting and the cultural sector, a former member of the Ngāti Whātua Ōrākei Trust Board and current member of the Auckland War Memorial Taumata a Iwi. We're really, really lucky to have Joe with us today for this conversation. Welcome, Joe.
Tēnā koe, Kirsten.
I thought we might start our conversation today, Joe. Just want to draw your mind back to your early years, really, growing up, to give our listeners a bit of a sense of how you began to corral the enormous body of knowledge that you carry with you today. Where did that begin? Where did your education, Māori education, begin?
It began at home, at the feet of my father and my mother, who were both very culturally aware, endowed. They were a part of a new generation, I think, for Ngāti Whātua, Ōrākei, that were beginning to push themselves out of the, let's say, the heavier times of the 1950s and 1960s. And when I came along, my father and my mother had taken on various roles within the community to help re-elevate and re-establish the presence of Ngāti Whātua. Because if we go back to 1952, our tribal village had been pretty much destroyed by the council, and that was on the back of probably 50 years of concerted and focused energy by the kaunihera, the Auckland City Council and the government, to relieve the Ngāti Whātua owners of their land and to move us off elsewhere because it was prime land. It is prime land. Our papakainga, which was in 1952 on the foreshore at Ōkahu Bay. And so if you drive now along there, you'll find that there's a beautiful park and lots of green area to play on and relax upon, and you've got the beach. Well, that was our home. However, in 1952, the final axe had fallen really on our people. The village had been demolished by the bulldozers of the council, and my people had been moved into state housing up on top of the hill, adjacent to our old papakainga, where you'll find it now. And many of the whānau there actually weren't able to fit into the homes that had been provided by the government. And so they were forced to move away, and families were broken, connections to the whenua were broken, the connections to the deeper philosophy of tangata whenua and tūranga waiwai, they were destroyed. In the 1970s, Ngāti Whātua had scratched itself out of the dirt again and had begun to reluctantly work alongside other organisations and parties, including a very well-meaning Pākehā community at that time to raise money, funding to rebuild a marae, which is our marae that we have today at Ōrākei. And so that was the environment that I grew up in, a time of great change, a time of ambition. However, a lot of heaviness still attached to the generation that had lived through all of that turmoil.
How long had your family been living on that land where the marae now stands? How far does it go back, that relationship to that part of Auckland?
Well, all of that area, including where the marae, the new marae, now stands, that was all part and parcel of the tribal lands anyway. However, it wasn't the papakainga that had been more or less established in the 1820s as a permanent papakainga, as a permanent village for the people of Ngāti Whātua or Ōrākei, as we know them now. From the 1750s right through to 1820, the Ōkahu Bay area, the Ōrākei area that we know now, was one of a number of satellite villages that would be occupied and inhabited for a time during the year, according to the movements of the environment, the changes in the environment, the fishing calendar, the different seasons of the year in terms of growing food and whatnot. And so my people did move around Tāmaki Makaurau and would live in different parts of Tāmaki at different times of the year. However, in the 1820s, it was determined by Āpihai Te Kawo and other leading chiefs of the time that Ōkahu Bay would be the headquarters for his people.
Now, you mentioned Āpihai Te Kawo, the paramount chief at Ngāti Whātua at that time. There's an important anniversary coming up. Can you tell us a little bit about that and Āpihai's relationship to the Crown and the gifting of Auckland? Because this part of Ōrākei that you're talking about, how does that fit within what happened with Āpihai and his agreement with the Crown?
Sure. Location is everything. And so if we look at the location of the Auckland Art Gallery, Toi o Tāmaki, where it sits is in the Horotiu area, and that's right in the middle of a parcel of land that was gifted by Āpihai. But I just want to take us back very quickly. In 1740, there was a huge change of residence, I should say, here in Auckland, in Tāmaki Makaurau, where you had the original or previous tangata whenua, the Waiohua people. They were pretty much resident right through this Tāmaki Makaurau, Auckland isthmus. But come the period of 1740, there'd been a number of issues, and we were attacked by the Waiohua in the southern Kaipara area where we pretty much lived. That was the border. But after the attack on our people, it was determined that there would be a number of revenge attacks back on the Waiohua. However, the third and penultimate battle, it was decided by the Te Tāu and Te Tāu people. These would morph into what we know as Ngāti Whātua now, illustrious tupuna. However, Tupiriri, Āpihai Te Kawo's grandfather, he was the leader in the final penultimate battle. Waiohua were defeated. Te Tāu then took pretty much a hold of this whole area, the whole of the Tāmaki Isthmus, as their territory. And so it expanded the territory, the Ngāti Whātua territory as we know it today, but it was really the Te Tāu territory. So that's the context that Āpihai was born into, to his father, Tairāwhiti, son of Tupiriri, and also to his mother, Mokorua. And she was pretty much from the Waiohua gene pool. And so she was married as part of an alliance building strategy. And so Āpihai was born. He carried the whakapapa of not only the invaders and the conquerors, but also the whakapapa of those who had been here before, who were conquered, and who were the long, deep holders of the DNA of the whakapapa of this area for over 500 years previous. And so you've got Āpihai. He is the coming together of the conqueror and the conquered. He was having to navigate his people through a really tumultuous period. Let's say in the 1820s, you had the rise of Ngāpuhi, their ability through the hundreds of guns that they had, through the armoury that they'd gotten together. Ngāpuhi were now going out and attacking every iwi who had formerly defeated them. We were on the, on that list of iwi to be, repaid in kind or not kind. And so that did come. Retribution from Hongi Hika and Ngāpuhi came in 1825. Tāmaki had been totally devastated. It had become desolate. There was no one living here for a full 10 years because of the fear of the gun. But in 1835, 1836, you have the gradual returning of these people back to their homelands in Tāmaki Makaurau, and Apihai was right at the forefront in ensuring that his people were able to reclaim, resettle, and to rekindle those fires, the ahika, the fires of occupation, the fires of mana back on the lands of Ngāti Whātua. And 1840 is a pivotal year. Apihai and his people have only just resettled the Ōrākei Ōkahu kāinga again. They've just come back. And there's a major hui that's been called by Apihai and other chiefs of Te Tāu, of Ngāoho, Te Uringutu. These are the hapu of Ngāti Whātua. And they were really wanting to find out, well, what the hell are we up to? Ngāpuhi laid devastation to our lands, to our people. And in the last 5 years, we've come back to Tāmaki. But we've really got to figure out how are we going to progress forward, because now we have the Pākehā who are starting to become a part of the wider social context.
Our international listers, Pākehā, we're referring to non-Māori that are beginning to settle, and the numbers growing rapidly in Auckland at that time, right?
That's right. And so in 1840, Pākehā, non-Māori, European extraction, who became a distraction. You're seeing growing numbers. These aren't the whalers and traders. I mean, they were here 30 years before in Aotearoa. We're now talking about people looking to buy land, to make a dollar. We're talking about people who are coming in to actually try their luck. And so Apihai Te Kauau and his people get together in 1840 in February, and during that hui, you get this narrative or the prophecy that is revealed by a tohunga. And a tohunga is a seer, a spiritual advisor, a expert. And the vision becomes pretty much a seminal kōrero or narrative for Ngāti Whātua. And it goes like this: He hate hau e wawara, he tu heraki nāna ia mai te pūpū tarakihi ki uta. E tiki nātu e au te kotu ko ia te pau whakairo, kātū ki te wai te mata. And basically the translation is, what are the winds that blow? What are they that blow to the north, these northern winds? It is the wind that blows the pūpū tarakihi, the nautilus shell, upon the shores here. I'll go and fetch it. I will fetch that wind, I will fetch the nautilus shell, and I will erect a carved post here in Tāmaki at the Waitemata waters. After the prophecy was given, Apihai, his advisors and other chiefs sat down and had a discussion, and there were 3 major tohu or symbols that came out of it. And the tohu were the hau, the wind, being an authority or this new mana that was making noises. The second one was the pūpū tarakihi, the white nautilus shell, blown ashore. And they saw it as being the clippers and the ships and the schooners coming into the Waitemata harbour en masse. And the final tohu was the pouwhakairo, the carved post which Apihai would erect within his territory. After a brief hui again and discussion about what this may have, what were the portents of it, it was decided that there was a big hui up in the north, the Treaty of Waitangi. And there was a great Pākehā chief. We must go and fetch him. And we will bring him down to the Waitemata, to Tāmaki Makaurau. And we will erect him and establish him as a friend and as a authority for the Pākehā that are coming into this area too. And so Apihai sent his envoy of his nephew Tairāwhiti and a group to go and fetch Hobson. And the message to Hobson was, to you, the great chief, we offer you a place to bring your people, to bring your house of authority to the beautiful lands of Ngāti Whātua, where we will be a friend for you. That offer was accepted by Hobson, and you had the first group of government officials led by Captain Simons, and of course you had Felton Matthew and other surveyors and whatnot come down to establish whether there was a benefit in accepting the offer of moving from Kororareka, Russell, Bay of Islands, down to Auckland, Tāmaki Makaurau.
And in those conversations between Apihā and Hobson, what were they envisaging together for the growth and establishment of this kind of bicultural community here in Tāmaki Makaurau? What were they imagining for the future?
Well, I can only delve probably into the mind of my tupuna, who's my great-great-great-great-great-great-grandfather, Apihai Te Kawo. And all I could imagine is that Apihai had seen the advantages and the benefits of a friendship, a relationship with the Pākehā people who were coming into Aotearoa. And so no doubt Apihai had foremost in his mind a desire and want to explore a relationship that would open opportunities for learning, exchanging, trading, but also friendship and an ongoing relationship that would be mutually beneficial for Māori and Pākehā. 1840, you get that first group of government officials representing Hobson coming down. And on March 20th, you've got Captain Simon already getting Apihai and 3 others from Ngāti Whātua to sign the Treaty of Waitangi on the Manukau, the shores of the Manukau. And so they were moving pretty quick. And so I think as the Treaty of Waitangi was signed in March, that's fine. Apihai was still trying to figure out, well, what does it mean, partnership here? What does it mean in terms of the protection of our taonga, but also allowing the British to come in here and be able to manage their people, ensuring that my way of life, my beliefs, my philosophies aren't lost. I don't think Apihai ever foresaw what would happen post-1840. You know, Apihai and his people were working to bring, I think, right onto their doorstep, Hobson, who could give real embodiment to what the treaty, what it was implying in terms of partnership, mana and mana, authority and authority being retained by Māori. I think that was really important. You know, the trading and whatnot, that was great, but more so it was about the mana, the authority being recognised going forward. However, Apihai was happy to make the first tuku, the release of land, a gift, which would be taken from the top of Maunga Whau, Mount Eden. It would lay a line down toward Parnell, Taurarua, to the east and on the western side, out to Ōpau, Tūteka, Herne Bay. And what we have now is we've got a 3,000 acre parcel of land, which was gifted by Apihai, which was, I think, an extension of Apihai's desire to, I think, really get this relationship moving. And that land was gifted, and on the 18th of September, 1840, you've got a group of government officials, Ngāti Whātua, They're standing over at Te Rerenga Ōrākei, which is pretty much near the end of Princes Street at the university where it starts to duck down. And they run a flag up the flagpole. There's a 21-gun salute, I think, and hurrah, hurrah, haka and waiata, no doubt. And that becomes the recognition of that transfer of land and the beginning of what would become the birth of Auckland. And I think it's really important to remember that Logan Campbell lies on top of One Tree Hill. One Tree Hill, Maunga Kieke, really important because it was the first papakainga of Tupiriri, the conqueror of Tāmaki, grandfather of Apihai, and that Logan Campbell would choose that site to be his final resting place, which, for Ngāti Whātua, it kind of, it hurts in a up here. However, let's correct the record. Logan Campbell, he came here to try and make a dollar, and he was a trader. He was a storekeeper. He was, he had his fingers in everything. But you've got Apihai Te Kabo, who was sought out by Logan Campbell as a younger man to sell him land, to give him land and whatnot. Now, you've got Logan Campbell acknowledged as the father of Auckland. We've got to correct this, eh?
It's pretty uncomfortable.
It's very uncomfortable. What we've got to understand is that the gifting of that 3,000-acre block of land, it wouldn't have happened without Apihai. Apihai was the paramount chief of the Tāmaki Makaurau area. There was no other who had authority above Apihai. Hobson was a guest coming in to Apihai's domain, and Apihai gave that land to, create that opportunity for friendship, for partnership, and a physical gesture to say to Hobson, let's make this happen, let's do it. Today, Apihai Te Kabo has been almost forgotten, within the annals of history. And you've got Logan Campbell up on top of, my old place, Maunga Kieke, with the words, the father of Auckland. Well, that's rubbish. Logan Campbell came here to make a buck. He came here to make some money. It was Apihai Te Kabo who allowed and enabled this, beautiful city to be born into what it is now, Tāmaki Makaurau, then Auckland. So we're really pleased, actually, that in the last few years, Ngāti Whātua has been able to resurrect that narrative and to commemorate Apihai Te Kabo, but not only Apihai, but the other rangatira of Ngāti Whātua who agreed that,
Such an important story, and really everyone living in Auckland should know the name Apihai Te Kabo and what he did for what is now Auckland, a city that we love. I mean, it's such a small thing, but really pleased that we are acknowledging Apihai in the naming of one of our galleries, and due to do that at the time of this anniversary as well. A small matter, but in a gallery that's 137 years old, well and truly overdue as well. I just want to, get your sense about naming and the place names around Auckland, because they are a real conduit to be able to tell stories that shouldn't be lost. Is there anywhere outside of the marae where Apihai and his father before him are acknowledged in our civic place names?
There are some places that Apihai has been recognised again lately. There's a couple of lovely commemoration markers, I think we can call them, that note in a public way. However, if you look back at the names of the places within Tāmaki Makaurau, you do have names that still remain there that have a relationship to Apihai, Te Pūpū o Te Kawau, over on the Tāmaki River, referring to the bundle of hair of Apihai, where he would have probably had his hair, sacred ritual, had his hair cut. You've got other places around which do refer to Apihai. However, Apihai's father and grandfather came to Tāmaki to conquer it. A lot of it had already been named. And so a lot of those older names remained. Take, for instance, Paritai Drive, which is one of your very affluent addresses in Auckland, in Ōrākei. Well, the corner of Paritai Drive is called Onepu Whakatakataka. Onepu Whakatakataka means the beach upon which the many fell upon, or stumbled upon. Now, that's got two parts. One is you've got a man by the name of Kāwharu, who is thought to have fallen over down there on the beach, or from a previous battle there where bodies of the slain were tossed over and tumbled down onto the beach. Then, in the deeper narrative, you then recall the names of the people who were there, the whakapapa genealogies, the connectivity to the people who were involved in the battle, to the survivors, to those who live today and carry that DNA, who are the embodiment now of those who were before. Those are important, and they're everywhere. You know, right throughout Tāmaki Makaurau, they still remain. They may be covered over in concrete, they may be covered over in buildings and whatnot, but they are there. But not only that, the library of narrative that they lead you into, they all still remain. Some are missing, but there's a lot of narrative and there's a lot of connections that are very real today. So I think September 18 reconnects us all into a time to the beginnings of this bicultural environment, because it does mark the birth of Auckland, but it marks a partnership. It marks an environment that was quite different to the environment that was before it, which was very Māori, which was Māori driven, which was dominated by Māori philosophy, Māori narrative, Māori place names. Morning to night, it was a Māori world.
I've got just two more questions
Sure.
for you. Thinking about the beginnings of that relationship with what has now become the Auckland City Council, effectively, to now as well, looking at Ngāti Whātua, the biggest ratepayer in the whole city. What are your hopes in terms of the relationship with the city, particularly looking at the lenses of this often explored idea around co-governance? What would the ideal be like in terms of the relationship between Ngāti Whātua and the city here?
I think the 18th of September is a good time for the council to recalibrate its vision and its view with regard to tangata whenua. At the moment, there is a statutory and legislative environment. However it's happened, but there has been a recognition of 18 other iwi, and that recognition has led to a number of acknowledgements, which have led to then a number of rights through different bylaws and whatnot, and the creation of forums which give a voice and give authority to these 18 other people. These people now call themselves mana whenua, and I think it's really become a distraction. It's become a huge place of concern, I think, for not only Ngāti Whātua as tangata whenua in Tāmaki Makaurau, but I think it is a concern for the whole of Māoridom. And so the 18th of September is a great time for the local council to recalibrate and to actually look at the Treaty of Waitangi and the solemn pact and partnership between tangata whenua and the Crown. And that's where the relationship should be. And so my hope is that we can start to refocus the co-governance space between the Crown via the Council and tangata whenua via Ngāti Whātua, so that we can get to a point of understanding as to how can we all cater to and manaaki and care for not only the ratepayers, not only those that live here in Tāmaki and don't pay rates, regardless of where you're from or your tribal background or your ethnic origins or whatever, I think the Crown, via the Council and Ngāti Whātua, have a job to look after and to care for well-being and to elevate abundance for all people here in Tāmaki Makaurau. But it's got to be done properly, and it's got to be done through the lens of a treaty-based partnership and not one that's been brought about through a recent statute or other legislation. So let's get back to 1840, September 18. Who was it that gifted the land that allowed Hobson and his government to come here, that allowed for the settlement of Tāmaki Makaurau, that allowed for the birth of Auckland City? Who was it that put the hand out to offer that gift? It was Apihai Te Kawau, it was Ngāti Whātua. So let's get back to that common ground again.
It's such an extraordinary history throughout the 20th century and that mid-century moment as well, and to see what the iwi have achieved in, regeneration of the Gulf, Ōrākei Gulf, in education, in healthcare, in all the business interests. It's really amazing to journey and, a great story to be told. You brought with you today, Joe, your tuka. Toko. Can you share with me the story of this walking stick?
It's relatively new. It was carved for me by a man by the name of Hoani Aupodi, and he carved it for me when I graduated from Te Pane Kiritanga, o Te Reo Māori, which is the School of Excellence for Te Reo Māori, and that was in 2014. It was carved basically as a, to commemorate that time of graduation. However, it is very similar to toko of old, and it is also a aid to remember whakapapa. So while I'm reciting whakapapa, it has different lines here. And if you count these parts here, there are actually 10 of them, from there to there. And the figure at the top here, his name is Tuperiri, the original conqueror, the grandfather of Apihai. And if you count down these lines here, they bring it down to me. And so, Tuperiri, Tarahawaiki, Apihai Te Kawau, Apihai had Hira Whakamana, Hami Pateoro, Hami had Kirihipina, Kirihipina had Mate Huirua had Meri Ngāroto, Hapi, myself, and then you've got my children. And so it's not only an aid for reciting whakapapa, but it's also an embodiment of an extension of me, of who I am, when I'm undertaking whai kōrero, when I'm undertaking formal oratory. It's a way for me to extend upon and exude the ihi, the wana, the tapu, the different essences of the spiritual and cultural essence, while I'm talking, manipulating the rākau here, tuperiri. It's an extension of me, and it's an extension of my tupuna, who all talk through me. So I'm not me when I talk, I'm them, and they come through me.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Joe, for joining with me today. You've been listening to Cultured Conversations. You can dip into more of this series at www.aucklandartgallery.com or on Spotify, iHeartRadio, or on Business Desk. You've been listening to Kirsten Lacy, your host, in conversation with Joe Pihema. Thank you.